Let's go to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and talk to Colin. What's up, Colin?
I'm doing pretty okay. I'm just finished up walking with my daughter. I got my second cup of coffee. I got my notebook, and I'm just really honored to be here talking to you.
Dude, that sounds like almost the perfect morning, man. Fantastic. So what's up, dude?
So I'll start with my question. Coming in pretty hot. I survived a suicide attempt about 7 years ago. I feel like it connects to me being more cynical about the world, and I want to change that.
Well, thanks for calling, man. How many little ones do you have?
I just got one. I got a baby girl who's 9 months old, and it's the best.
That's cool. Are you able to talk about what happened 7 years ago?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
So at the time, I was in to give you I'll quickly tell you where I'm at now. I'm 29, been married for 4 years. I adore my wife. I have this 9-month-old beautiful baby girl. And as we enter our 30s, as we purchase our first home, I'm mostly calling about this event and my cynicism to hopefully change my outlook and not have it rub off on this sweet baby girl and my wife. So 7 years ago, I would say honestly, I've had on paper, for the most part, a pretty normal, successful time as a 20-something. So got my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree. But the kind of blip, which I would say more so is an explosion on that timeline, is this suicide attempt. So it was Easter morning, actually, and I, at the time, was in a pretty toxic relationship. Was wrestling some with my faith. I would say I'm a strong Christian believer now, but certainly had my time of deconstructing and reconstructing and all of that. So that was pretty hairy, and just really wrestling with identity, feeling enough. And that morning, that relationship ended. I was actually on my way to church and decided instead to take a left in my car, go the other way. I found a parking lot, just felt this immense emptiness, and kind of something you probably don't hear every day when it comes to suicide attempts. But I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I just decided to load up on insulin and try to overdose that way and end things. Sent out a conventional, you could say, message to family and friends. Hey, I just did this. And then kind of went on a drive around town while my phone blew up. And I was eventually found in a grocery parking lot, still completely conscious and fine, and rushed to the ER. And thankfully, before all of this happened, or I guess before things got bad, I should say, they were able to balance out my blood sugar. You can stop me at any time, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to get a picture of, trying to listen for how you're telling the story. Did you have a history of this before?
I didn't. That's the thing.
It's kind of a snap decision. I don't want to hurt anymore. I'm sick of the world, and you have an opportunity right there with you.
Yeah.
And did you ever go into a coma? I didn't hear what you said.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
The hospital, I don't know what happened because it was so overwhelming, but they got things fixed, and then I was sent away for a week or so. And
have you had any sort of suicidality since then? An idea of heading out again?
Zero.
Okay. So You've done a lot of work over the last few years, huh?
I have. Yeah, I would say I'm a very introspective, reflective guy. I think that though is kind of what got me into that situation was getting too in my head.
Yeah, that's fair. But you haven't touched the core issue. Why is there a ticker tape on the story of your life that runs underneath everything that goes on in your world? It says, I'm a piece of crap. Where does that come from? Because you've done a lot of work on relationships, and you've done a lot of work on faith, and you've done a lot of work on doing the right things, and you've probably become pretty disciplined in your life. You have not addressed the core issue, man. You just have this meta narrative, dude, that you suck. Where's that from? And by the way, this has nothing to do with a suicide attempt. Go back and listen to the call. Like when you get done, like this is about how you talk about your wife. You talk about your daughter. You think you're a burden to them. Where does that come from? Why do you think they are worse off because you're in their life? Because it's not true. Where does that come from?
I would say it's a great question, and I'm trying to think through.
Hold on. You have created a force field around your life with your intellect and your ability to construct and deconstruct ideas and situations and people and religions and all that stuff. And it provides you a force field from having to do one scary thing, and that is actually feel something. So I don't want you thinking about it and going down what's the right words and what's the right thing. Where did you get this story? You know the answer.
I would say.
Did you grow up in a super religious household?
I did not. Quite the opposite.
Okay.
I mean, I'm the only believer in my family. It was never something. I mean, I never heard about any of it until I didn't hear about faith or Christianity until high school. So I didn't find out until after the fact that my parents disagreed with that and didn't buy into that. I'm also a middle child, for what that's worth. But
I am too. We're all kind of a little bit messed up. So. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Cynicism is a bulletproof vest that you put on to head into your day so that you don't have to feel. And it protects you from shame, protects you from looking at that 9-year-old little girl and being scared about the economy or whether China is going to invade or whatever the news is telling you the next tragedy du jour is. And there's a helpless feeling when you hold your first baby. There's a helpless feeling that nobody talks about because it's either Andrew Tate flexing or it's this passive nonsense. And in the middle is the rest of us who's newly married 3 or 4 years in, and this woman hugs us on a couch with a sense they lean on you with a weight that says, I put my hands in your life. And that has nothing to do with who's making the most money in the house, how you're splitting up chores. It's just a responsibility that every man I know feels at some shape, form, or fashion. And it's really, really heavy, and our dads didn't tell us that.
Yeah, and I would say it's pretty exhausting, because I don't want to be cynical. I don't want that for these women in my home.
No, bro. I don't want it for you.
That too.
I don't want it for you. And if you do things for them like that all the time, at some point you run out of gas. which is why it's so counterintuitive when I tell you the path out of this is you have to say, as an identity, a new identity for Colin, I reject cynicism. I'm not going there. It's a waste of my time, and it destroys me and my family. If you were to ask me of what I think is the most profound psychological finding of the last 100 years, I could talk to you about Amos Tversky, I could talk to you about Kahneman, all the greats. But it would come back to one thing that has impacted me personally the most, and that's from Martin Seligman, who does a lot of work on positive psychology. And basically, the study of psychology has always been, what's the pathology? What's wrong with somebody? And Martin came in and goes, why don't we look at what's right? Because there's a whole bunch of things that are right with people, but there's just one or two things that people are struggling with. What if we spend our energy working on what's right? And through some of his experiments, what he came to uncover that has greatly impacted me is this. We all thought, psychologically speaking, for 100 or 200 or maybe thousands of years, I haven't dug into it that far, but that certain people were Eeyores. They're just born that way. And certain people were just like, hey, everybody. They were just joyful people. And the rest of us fell on some sort of spectrum. What Seligman comes back and suggests is that optimism is a learned behavior. Pessimism and cynicism is a learned behavior. And when anyone says the words learned behavior to me, I exchange learned behavior with choice. I choose to look at the most cosmic negative way I can look at something. Or we all know people who someone goes, hey man, the economy is about to go down. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's because of the Republicans and the Democrats and we got to get a freezer and we got to plant a garden. It's all coming down. And then there's those friends that we have that are like, there's going to be a recession. And they smile real big and they're like, dude, we're going to make millions. That's not an operating system. It's a learned behavior. It's a choice. And so by you saying, I reject cynicism, I'm going to choose optimism, I'm going to choose joy. And by the way, cynicism and pessimism, that's our culture's wisdom these days. You and me could probably go round and round over drinks and have a blast. And you would probably run circles around me deconstructing faith because you've been there. And cynicism and pessimism and, oh yeah, what about this? What about this? That is what our culture calls wisdom these days. And I wholeheartedly reject that. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. And so the only path forward is, number one, you got to write 22-year-old Colin a letter and forgive him for scaring you to death. You gotta let that dude off the hook, man. He made a rash decision. He freaked out. He has heartbroken on Easter morning. He was exhausted and didn't want to hurt anymore. And he reached over and grabbed the one thing he had, which is insulin pump, and tried to walk out on it. Right?
Yeah.
And then you got to look at 29-year-old, 28-year-old Colin and say, dude, we're going to practice optimism. And we're going to reject cynicism. And that means you can be optimistic and heartbroken. You can be optimistic and scared to death. You can be optimistic and really frustrated. But that's different than feeling like my wife when you hold your baby or you hold your wife and you think, I'm so sorry y'all are stuck with me. Tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong.
You're dead on. I mean, relate to so much of what you just said, and those like two types of people I can relate to. I have great. That's the thing. That's what's so frustrating up to this point. Like you said, how you described me as disciplined, doing a lot of work is absolutely true. I have great community, like awesome men in my life.
I know, but you're the guy. You're the guy in those men that is the architect of the conversations, because that's how you defend yourself.
I'm only laughing because, I mean, you're just putting language to. You're absolutely right. Yes, I'm only laughing because you're dead on.
So for the next 3 weeks, next 3 months, when you hang out with those dudes, you can't say anything. What you can do is when somebody says they're struggling with something, they're heartbroken about something, that you look at them, and if you want to be really intentional and weird, put your hand on their shoulder and say, hey man, thank you for sharing that. Period. No other words. And what you're going to find is the identity you had as the guy with the answers and the guy with all of the, oh yeah, what up? Because here's the deal. Guys like you and me who build these webs of intelligence to protect ourselves, we don't have any thoughts of our own. We don't have any values of our own because our only value is making sure you can't ever sit still on your value because I've got a way to pull it apart.
Yeah.
And I'm a few years ahead of you, and I'm telling you, you hit a brick wall. Because when you're anchorless and you have no value anchored in other than I'm the smartest guy in the room, or I can pull this guy's argument apart, or I can pull this guy's argument apart, then a 9-month-old little girl looks at you and says, Daddy, what's right? Your wife looks at you and says, hey, can we create a set of values for this home? And your inside knows my only value is, well, they're dumb. And that's not something you can build a home on. And so practicing optimism, and that sounds all kumbaya. Here's what I mean. A, quit watching the news. Just turn it off. Just stop. Number 2, read fiction for a while. You need to detox from turn podcasts off for a while. Even mine. And mine's incredible, by the way. Just kidding. But you got to detox from info, because what you do is you listen to an hour podcast like this, you take 2 of the lines, and then you use that to spread amongst, right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Instead, start practicing feeling valuable just because you're present, just because you're there. And what you're going to be surprised is that people value Colin because Colin showed up, not because Colin listens to obscure podcasts that nobody's heard of.
Yeah.
And can wrap circles around penal substitutionary atonement and all the, like, you can just do all that, right? You know all those things, and they don't. Man, Colin has value. The only path forward, man, is you got to learn to feel. And this is the pot talking to the kettle here. I'm practicing this as we speak. It's hard.
Do you have, I've been on antidepressants since that suicide attempt. And there's days where I'll forget to take them, and I just like bawl. Like it's like this whole world has opened up of feeling, and I'm also afraid to go off of them, though.
Yeah, it's been 7 years.
Yeah,
I took sleep medications for 7 years, 6-7 years, and I was terrified to get off. Terrified. And I spent months being unable to sleep. Scary. Totally get it. Totally get it. What I would tell you is, at some point, you sit down with your doctor and with your counselor or psychiatrist, and you say, I'm ready to enter into a new phase of my life where I need to come up with some scaffolding, some structure, and we're going to do this real slow. But I want to learn to feel. And I want to learn some strategies for feeling. And that means they're going to have some really clear suicide plan in case that feeling or that urge comes up again. And you're going to have to commit before me and your doctors and practitioners and your friends and family and God that you will call and you will not take your life. Do you commit that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I have too much to live for.
You're 100%. Exactly. So they're going to come up with some strategies and plans, and then it's just a stair-stepped process. Cool. We'll reduce it by this much for this period of time. We're going to practice it. We're going to feel it. And yes, you're going to have periods of time when you just weep openly. That stuff's stored in your body. It doesn't go anywhere. There's going to be periods where you were super disciplined and now you can't get out of bed. There's going to be all that's going to be part of the thing, part of your healing process, if that's what you choose to do. But you're going to have to, this is the cornerstone, you're going to have people in your corner. You're going to have to start trying to intellectualize everything. You're just going to have to be honest about what you feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that fair?
It's fair. I have one scary, stupid question that I want to ask you out loud.
Ask it out loud.
I feel like is obvious. You don't think it's too late for me to change my outlook?
I went to a trauma counselor for the first time about 4 months ago. And everything in my life is different because there's stuff I've never talked about ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in my 40s. And I have a 7-year-old little girl and a 13-year-old little boy and a woman I've been married to for 21 years. No. And I've sat with 70-year-olds who decide to change their life and start lifting weights and start eating a little different and call their kids and they say, I'm sorry. With the time we got left, can we Control Alt Delete and do something new?
Mm-hmm.
I do not believe in the phrase, it's too late. But I want you to hear the order of this. Start with your wife. Take her out to a dinner, take her out to breakfast and say, I'm getting ready to enter into healing part 2. We've been on maintenance for 7 years. We feel good. We feel safe. We feel secure. We got a beautiful kid. We got a great marriage. We're heading into part 2. And part 2 is going to be rough. It's going to be bumpy. I'd be willing to bet you money if we had another hour to talk. You had some stuff going on in your childhood that is gnarly. You're going to have to deal with that, or it will deal with you. It's part of the journey. And the next conversation after your wife is you're going to sit down with your doctor or your counselor or both in a perfect world, and you're going to let everybody know, I need some coaches and I need some physicians, I need some ringside support because I'm heading into the middle of the ring here. And we're going to stair step off this stuff. I'm going to practice feeling. I'm going to practice learning. I'm going to practice crying and holding that. I'm going to practice feeling joy for the first time in a long time. I'm going to practice feeling embarrassment and shame. I'm going to practice all those things over the next 1, 2. Dude, this is a multi-year journey you're on. It's all good. Just like lifting weights, man. Some days you have good workouts, some days you don't. But over the long haul, you get healthier, you feel better, and you can do so much more. I cannot put into words how proud of you I am, Colin. This is what bravery and courage and just straight gangster looks like. A dad, his little baby girl, and his wife. And dad looking in the mirror saying, I'm worth being well so that I can show up for these two with all I got. I'll walk with you, brother, every step of the way here. Holler at me anytime. I'm proud of you.